Good morning.
Good morning.
What I'd like to do here is let me just summarize this, and then we'll go through the slides, and then if we've got time, I'll take a couple of questions, and if not, I'll be available after the talk. But I want to first start out with what the driving interest is in pellets, and then what's happening here in the South as a result of that. A little bit about Westervelt's background, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail because I think most of you are familiar with the company already. And then talk a little bit about why we're interested and what our approach is in the pellet market, and then maybe what the future of the pellet industry might look like and how that might impact this part of the country. Okay. First thing, interesting slide, and this information just came out a couple of weeks ago. Exports of wood pellets are up about 300% from 2008, and they finally exceeded the 2 million ton mark, which is a milestone. It's not a large number, but compared to where it was, it is a good number, and it's a growing number. And for the first time, in the second half of 2011, the United States caught up with Canada, who was previously the primary exporter of pellets for North America. So that's a big step for the U.S., and I think that number will continue to grow. The Netherlands, UK, and Belgium are the biggest consumers of industrial pellets from the U.S. at this point in time. Just looking at the map from an international standpoint, the red dots on here signify areas of supply. You see primarily Canada, North America, the U.S., and then if you look down to South America, you'll see some pellet operations beginning to come online from there, and I'll mention this again later. Those are going to be very large plants, very low cost, and those will probably be our competitor in the future. Most of the pellets, some originate in Russia, but fortunately for manufacturers here, most of the large utility buyers don't really trust the Russian government because they continually change their policies. They add tariffs, they put freezes on, and then they've got the issues of trying to log in some of the climate conditions over there. So as a result, while they have an abundant supply of wood, most of these utility buyers keep looking back to the U.S. and Canada and beginning to look at South America for sources of supply. It's pretty obvious why biomass is popular in the Southeast and why utility buyers look to the Southeast and to the East itself for pellets. If you start to fill in the river system, you can see where the interior of the Southeast becomes more viable. We've got a number of ports. Wood pellets are already shipping out of New Orleans, Mobile, and Panama City. On the East Coast, Charleston, Savannah, and Brunswick are shipping pellets, and Jacksonville is building some infrastructure to begin shipping pellets. So really, it's shaping up to be a very good market. One of the things to note, the East Coast ports do have about a $7 to $8 per ton advantage shipping to Europe because of freight. So we've got to go all the way around Florida. That's going to add $7 to $8 to our cost. So that's something we have to take into account. The buyers have already figured that out. So we're selling at a discount to East Coast, but we still have the advantage of coming down this river. We can get things down to the ports in an economical manner. So for us, that works well. Let's see here. This plant shows production, or this map shows production. The red dots are operations that are already active, and the blue dots show plants that not are announced but are actually under construction. If you look at what's announced, you can fill the whole map up with dots, and it really doesn't mean anything because most of those don't get built. These, though, have had money spent on them, and there's actually concrete going in the ground, steel coming out of the ground. Interesting to note for us, there's really only one plant in Alabama, a fairly small plant up around Guntersville, that's actually producing pellets for the export market. The other plants, there's one in Amory, Mississippi, one in Wiggins, and then if you go over to Green Circle in Florida. So they're sort of ringing Alabama, but there's really not much production today in Alabama, and that's one of the things that we hope to change. Westervelt, as many of you probably know, we're family owned. We're in our fourth generation, formed in 1884, and Although we did at one time, we started out as a paper company, we did retain that land base, and we've continued to build on that land base. So all of our businesses really look at that land base and look at revenue stacking and maintaining that asset which our founders invested in many years ago. Some of you probably had the opportunity to visit our sawmill yesterday. We produce a variety of wood products, and in addition, biomass, and we sell a lot of byproducts in pulpwood and other types of products back into the pulp and paper industry, although we did exit that years ago. So we still have a pretty good understanding of what their supply and demand needs and what their cost structures are as well. Westervelt Renewable Energy was initially formed in 2007, and it was more of an exploratory type thing. We spent a lot of time doing research and decided that we had opportunities to optimize some of the company's natural resources. Looking at pulpwood, sawmill residuals, other byproducts, and then we initially decided to focus on cogen, basically selling green power back to Alabama Power. That was our first project. We started that project probably right after, about a year or so after the financial downturn started. We had an opportunity there to utilize some equipment at Mountville that was, quite frankly, oversized. We had a boiler that was a lot larger than what we needed, and we were able to make some changes to that and really optimize that and generate that additional power. So what we ended up with was, after working with Alabama Power, we have what the PSC approved as their first green power project for Alabama Power. So we went through that process with them. I think Alabama Power now has a second partner online as well in that process. So they're continuing to develop renewable resources as well. The one thing to point out here, and the one thing that the PSC kept asking us about, okay, why are you going out to cut down trees to generate power? Well, that's not really economical, and I think you all in your position would know that. We're looking at byproducts, not pulpwood. You just can't generate power from pulpwood in a situation like this. This plant became operational in December, and we hope by the end of this year to have it up to the 7 megawatt target capacity that we established when we first designed the plant. Looking more at solid biofuel, and that's just a fancy way of, another name for wood pellets. That's really all that is. Wood pellets, really pelletizing is really nothing more than a better way to transport a product. If we're having to transport to Europe, it's much more economical. We can control moisture, we can control weights, it's more compact. So it's really a transport mechanism. That's really the way to look at that. It's another way of transporting wood from point A to point B. And when it arrives on the other end, it's a more efficient means for a power plant to convert that wood. So essentially what they're doing is they're taking maybe 10 to 15% of the coal, removing it and replacing it with wood pellets. They crush and grind the wood pellets in the same pulverizers that coal is pulverized in, blow it into the furnace, and that's how they create the energy. So, you know, granted, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It requires a little more wood than you replace with than the coal originally started with, but at the end of the day, it's less emissions, and that's what seems to be the driving point. Our particular interest, if you look at where our land holdings are, and the majority of ours obviously are in Alabama. We have about 50,000 acres or so in Mississippi and some in the other states, but it really makes sense for us to look at this type of product. We start, I think as most of you know, we have a nursery and seed orchard in Greene County. We control our process all the way through, and we're very careful about how we treat the environment. We have recently become FSC certified, and we were already SFI certified. So environmental is very important, and it's probably not very well known, but when you sign a contract with a European utility, they will send a third-party auditor from Europe to audit you. Even though you say you're FSC and SFI, they will still send an auditor in and they will verify that. They will look at chain of custody. They will look at everything. So that's very important to them and to their shareholders and to their government. So you know, that's not something that we can bypass and just say, okay, well, we don't have to do this, we can just ship it overseas. Some of those requirements are actually more stringent than what we face here on a daily basis. First thing we did in looking at this plant is we hired a third party to look at our land base and look at our assumptions and make sure that they were correct. The easiest way to justify a project is to create the idea yourself and then tell yourself it's a good idea, and then you'll go ahead and invest in it. We've got 100 years worth of history doing that, so we've learned over the years that sometimes, even though people inside say, you don't trust me, well, it's not a matter of trust, it's sometimes you need a third party to come in and you need a little dose of reality. So we brought in a third party consultant and had them look at our assumptions and try to shoot holes in it. Where's the best place to put a pellet plant? Should we even be looking at the pellet business? Is this area sustainable? What impact will putting a plant of X number of tons have on wood prices? What if we decide to increase that? What if we get a competitor in that wood basket? So those are the type of the things that we asked that third party to take a look at. As a result, we ended up, it's a little difficult to see in the back, but the blue, large blue area on the left is right, Aliceville is about in the center of that, and that's the wood basket that we picked. Down towards the bottom of the map, you'll notice the colors start to get a little darker. The darker the color, the more demand and the more competition in that area. That gets down around places like Demopolis and other areas where there are pulp and paper mills. The reality is a pellet plant can never compete with a pulp or paper mill for raw materials. The pulp and paper mill is a larger investment and it's always going to win on price. So don't even try to locate there. So when you hear people say, okay, well, you're taking my wood, well, the reality is how many wood pellet plants are really located near a pulp and paper mill? They would go out of business quickly if they did. So we try to stay as far away, try to look at underserved areas, and approach it from that standpoint. What we're doing in Aliceville, we're trying to source wood within 55 miles, and if we have to go up to 75, that's fine as well, but the closer the better. The good thing for landowners in that area is only 30% of that wood that goes into that plant will be from Westervelt. The other 70% is going to be from local landowners. And we do not anticipate that those ratios will change. That's really what our long-term plan is. So we will be buying quite a bit of wood in that area. And I'll talk a little bit in a minute about how we're going to phase the operation. But just to give you a rough idea, phase one would be about 600,000 green short tons of wood. Phase two, if we double the plant, obviously would take that number from 600 up to 1.2 million. We're also looking at a second plant, but not in that same wood basket, and it would be a sister to the first plant, so it would be looking at about another 1 million or so tons, but again, on a different river system in a different wood basket. Our assumption has been that we might not be able to buy residuals. If we can, that's great. That reduces our cost, especially if they're lower moisture, like planer mill shavings. But we built the plant and justified it on a worst-case scenario of 100% round wood coming in. So anything we can do to bring in residuals is going to help that cost, but the reality is those residuals can't be counted on. They're not always there. It's a fluctuating market, so we're approaching this just from a worst-case standpoint. A real high overview of our supply chain. We have company wood, as I mentioned, along with third-party wood, and then any residuals that might be available. We will we'll bring in the round wood, we'll debark it, chip it, we'll mill it, dry it, further refine it, more milling, and then we'll pelletize it, and then most likely it will all be, at this point, export. We show domestic sales up here. It's a possibility to sell something domestically, but quite frankly, many of the plants in the Northeast that currently produce for domestic markets are now trying to figure out how to ship the product overseas. It's been warmer climates over the past couple of years. The demand has not been there, and the demand is there from an industrial standpoint. So that's really where we're focusing at this point. Our platform, what we're trying to do, the Tombigbee River Basin, which is really the Aliceville area, Phase 1 will be 280,000 metric tons of product. That's pellets. And Phase 2 will double that, and then we hope with Plant 2 to get up to about 1 million metric tons a year. Now, the only way we'll move from Phase 1 to Phase 2 for Aliceville is if the wood basket is sustainable and if all of our assumptions prove to be correct. We could move to another wood basket without doing Phase 2, but we really want to make sure that we can sustain it. We didn't want to build a 560,000 metric ton plant right out of the bat and then have wood issue, wood supply problems over there. So that's one thing we've been very careful about. This next slide, just to cover what we're doing, we're using 100% southern yellow pine. Our process is designed to meet either U.S. or European industrial or utility specifications, so we can vary that as we go. We are using state-of-the-art emissions controls. Some of the plants, quite frankly, if you use a very high percentage of hardwood, you can sort of get by and not have to put in the same emissions controls. Using hardwood is good, and some plants do it, but we felt to be on the safe side we needed to assume 100% softwood and put all the emissions controls in. So there isn't anything any more modern, any cleaner, any more efficient than the equipment that we purchased for the plant, and we're very proud of that. It costs more to do that, so our cost per ton going in is more expensive than some of our competitors, but that's a decision we made. We felt it was the right thing to do. To sort of wrap things up over the next few slides, we're located in Aliceville. We purchased what used to be the Aliceville Pellet plant that closed down several years ago. It's right across the river from Cooper Marine. Also, our Westervelt Lodge is on the opposite side of the river. Cooper will be handling our logistics for us, so they're taking care of all the barging from the plant down to Mobile, and they'll be handling stevedoring in Mobile for us as well. So we've got a good relationship with Cooper, and we're looking forward to that. As you can see, the two rivers, the Tom Bigby River and then the Black Warrior, we'll look at the Black Warrior River area for Plant 2, and again looking at the same criteria for wood basket and sustainability. And then everything at this point will ship to the port, and then from Mobile will be transported from there via ocean carrier to Europe. This is just a real high, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail here, but this is just the production process, starting with wood coming in. The one reason I put this up is one of the very last steps in the process is pelletizing. Up to the point of pelletizing, everything prior to that is identical to a particle board plant. So if you're familiar with a particle board plant and know how they work and know how they run, you could, in theory, go to a particle board plant and take their press out and put pellet presses in there, and it would be the same process. So 80% of what we're doing here is already in existence in hundreds of places, across the country and across the world. So it's really known technology, not anything new. This is a conceptual layout of what the plant will look like. The gray box here is where the existing building is at the Aliceville plant. We will eventually take that down after Phase 1 construction is complete. In the background you can see the Tom Bigby River. We'll start with the wood yard, and we'll flow all the way through to with chipping, debarking, pelletizing, drying, and then silos, and then we'll load into barges at the plant. Get this figured out in a minute on the slides. Key business locations will operate out of Aliceville. Will be primarily production, and our administrative activities will be out of our offices down here on Jack Warner Parkway. And then hopefully a Plant 2 down in this area, and then at some point we may try to expand operations in Mobile. There are going to be quite a few more pellets going through Mobile. In Viva, which is a competitor of ours, and we also work closely with them. They're also founding members of the U.S. Industrial Pellet Association with us. We have a very good relationship, so as they expand, we look at ways to optimize that. So there may be ways to optimize what we're doing at the port. So one slide to wrap up what I think the future might look like. I think it could reach about 9 million tons out of this whole southern and eastern area by 2015. And I've got a little bit of a breakdown here, but what I did was I went through and looked at all the plants that had been announced, looked at the ones that had actually started construction, and then talked to the other members of the U.S. Industrial Pellet Association. So this is sort of our consensus of what we think is going to happen. So if you can imagine U.S. production of maybe 2 million right now and jumping up to 9 million, a lot of that's going to come out of the south and the southeast. So there's an opportunity there, and we're very excited to be part of that. With that, I think we're about out of time, but I can probably take some questions afterwards if that's more convenient. That way we'll get back on schedule. Thank you very much.